All right, good morning, everyone. Yesterday's notes, we went over what perfect squares and perfect cubes were, and we filled in this table. This part of the table wants you to square the different numbers. I'm just going to pick a couple of that. 5 times 5 is 25. 6 times 6 is 36. 8 times 8 is 64. So we just went all the way down the table and figured out what these numbers squared would give us. Now, on the right side, this is the square root. They're written in a radical form. This is a radical, and the numbers are placed inside. So you kind of going to go opposite of this side. So let's just pick out a couple. The square root of 49 is 7. Why? Because 7 times 7 gives you 49. The square root of 16 is 4. I should write it over here. Why? Because 4 times 4 gives you 16. The square root of 169 is 13. Again, why? Because 13 times 13 gives you 169. And the reason this works and why it's called square root is if you have a square, and the Desmos taught you this, if you have a square and a square all sides are equal and the sides are 4 by 4, that gives you your 16. If the sides were 13 by 13, that would give you 169 as an area. Okay, so that's the reason that works. Now, over here, we were talking about cube roots. Now, what's the difference? Well, we're multiplying by three different numbers. Okay, so if you fill in these charts, I'm just going to do a couple. 2 times 2 times 2, that gives you the 8. Okay, and then let's do one more. 3 times 3 times 3, that gives you the 27. Why am I multiplying it by 3? Because the exponent is 3. Okay, so let's go to the right side. These are the cubed roots. Again, they're in a radical, but they have a 3 here. That means cubed roots. So that means you're going to multiply it 3 different times. Okay, so the square root, the cube root of 216 basically means what number multiplied 3 times gives you 216? And that's going to be 6. Let's take a couple more. This one shows up often. Let's do 5. The cube root of 5, which is 5 times 5 times 5, gives you that 125. So that's a review from yesterday. I want to go down to this particular part of your notes, which is at the bottom of 141. These two questions are basically the same, and these two questions are basically the same. So I'm going to do the first one here. It says a square, so I'm going to draw a square, has the area of 196, so I'm going to put 196 in the middle. The question is, what's the length of one side? I'm going to put an X there. So basically, you're taking the square root because it's a square, and you're trying to figure out what number times itself gives you 196. And eventually, we're going to learn these by memorization, but 14, because what does that 14 mean? That means that 14 is there, and that 14 is also your height. So working it forwards to get the area, 14 times 14 is 96. The square root of 96 means what two numbers multiplied together give you 196, which is 14. Okay, now, let's go down to this one. A cube has the volume of 216. What is the length of one side? Now, let's see if I can draw a cube here. This is a cube, a three-dimensional figure. Now, you remember from our geometry unit, volume is length times width times height. Okay, so the volume is 216. So how do you find the length times width times height? You have to take the cubed root of 216. Why are you using cubed? Well, first of all, it is a cube, and the 3 means length times width times height. in a cube, all sides are equal. So we've got to figure out what number times 3 different times gives you 216. And we're going to look at the calculator in a minute, and I'm going to show you the easy way to do this. So that gives us an answer of 6. Now what does that 6 mean? That means 6 times 6 times 6 gives us 216. That's basically like plugging it back in the formula. Okay, so you've got an example of a regular square and a cube. Now, all these different cubed and square roots can be written in different ways. So let's look down here at the bottom. They want you to find the x on the left side. So let's focus on the left side. Now you notice that this x is squared and this x is cubed. So basically this is saying what number times itself gives you 121. So to find x, you're really going to take the square root of 121. And when we do that in the calculator, it gives us an x equals 1.1. So what does that x mean? 1.1 times 1.1 will give us this particular number right there. Okay? So make sure you get that down. Okay, so let's go to the next one down here. All right, so now we're trying to find x. But this time to find x, you're going to cube it. Why? Because it's x to the third power. So we're going to take the cube root of what? 27. So what does this mean? What number times 3 different times gives us 27? So if we plug it in the calculator, or when we memorize this, your x is going to be 3. Now again, what does that 3 mean? 3 times 3 times 3 equals 27. Why are we doing it 3 times? Because this is a cubed. And it's more of this shape right here. Okay, so let's go down and just choose. I want to do this negative right here. Let's look at that. Cubed, it's an x cubed, and it equals negative 512. Again, same thing. We're going to write it like that to find the x. What number times itself 3 times gives you negative 512? So going back to our integers, negative times a negative gives us a positive, and then a positive times a negative gives us a negative. So we're going to plug that in the calculator eventually, and your x is going to be negative 8. Now why does that work? Negative 8 times negative 8 times negative 8. This is 64. And then times another negative 8 gives us that 512. But that 512 is negative. If that 512 was positive, all these 8s would be positive, but it's negative on the inside. Okay, so let's go to the right side and do a couple. Now, these are written a different way. You're still trying to find out what x is, but now you're trying to find out in the radical. So we're basically working backwards. So this number is our key. This basically means this number multiplied 3 times. Why are we saying 3 times? Because it's a cube. Gives us what number? That gives us 27, and that is your x. Okay, so we're kind of working it backwards. And if you really wanted to see it in terms of yesterday's notes, if I plug that 27 in there, it's going to be, so what number times 3 times gives you 27? It's the 3. But for this question, it wanted you to find x, which is 27. Okay, so let's skip down a couple. Let's go down to this number right here. It's a little different. What number times itself? Now, we're only doing it twice because this is a square root and not a cube root. So what number multiplied twice? Well, what number are we talking about? We're talking about 4. So x is going to give us 16. that x. Let's check ourselves. Let's plug 16 in. What is the square root of 16? That is 4. So that checks out. But the answer for this particular problem is 16. All right. Let's do one more. Well, I think you can finish the rest. So I'm going to have you finish the rest of 141, and I'll give you about 10 minutes, and then we're going to go over all the answers together.